You're exhausted from the flight, your back aches, and your mouth tastes like stale coffee and recycled air. Then you see the line heading toward those immigration booths, and something tightens in your chest because you know what's coming. That moment when an officer looks up from your passport, meets your eyes, and asks a question that sounds simple but feels loaded. One wrong word, one nervous laugh, and suddenly, you're not walking toward the exit anymore. You're being guided to a small room with fluorescent lights and no windows. Every year, millions of travelers pass through immigration without incidents. But thousands don't. They get pulled aside, questioned for hours, and sometimes sent back on the next flight home. The difference isn't always about visas or paperwork. It's about those 10 questions officers ask and how you answer them. Most people think immigration is checking documents, but they're wrong. Immigration is reading people. They're trained to spot the tiny signals most of us don't even know we're sending. The hesitation before you speak, the way your eyes dart to the left when you're trying to remember a detail, or how your voice changes pitch when you're not quite telling the whole truth. Once you understand that pattern, everything changes. You stop feeling like a suspect and start moving through that line like someone who's done this 1,000 times. So let's break down the 10 questions that matter most, what they're really asking, and how to answer without raising a single red flag. The first question seems almost too obvious to mention. May I see your passport? You hand over the document and they scan it. What seems like routine stuff, except it's not routine at all. This is the opening move in a chess game you didn't know you were playing. Watch what actually happens in that moment. The officer isn't just checking if your passport is valid. They're watching how long it takes you to produce it. They're noticing if you have to dig through 3 bags to find it. They're reading your face for signs of stress beyond normal travel fatigue. Your passport should already be in your hand or in an easily accessible pocket before you even reach the counter. Not buried under magazines and duty-free shopping, not stuffed in your checked luggage where you have to panic and explain you made a mistake. Here's what experienced international travelers know. The smoother that exchange happens, the better your entire interaction will go. Hand it over calmly, make brief eye contact. Don't crack jokes about the photo being old or looking terrible. Officers hear those jokes 40 times a day and they've stopped being charming. Just a simple acknowledgement works perfectly. Immigration isn't the place for personality. It's the place for competence. When you fumble, when you seem disorganized or flustered, something shifts in how they perceive you. Because here's the truth, they won't tell you. Immigration officers deal with 2 types of problematic travelers. The ones trying to deceive and the ones who are simply unprepared. Both groups show similar nervous behaviors. So if you want to be seen as neither, you need to project calm capability from the very first second. The second question catches more people than you'd think. How long do you intend to stay? Sounds straightforward, right? You're visiting for a week? You say a week, but listen to how people actually answer this in real time. Well, I'm planning maybe 2 weeks, possibly 3, depending on whether my friend can get time off work, and we might drive up to see some relatives, but I'm not sure yet. Everything after the word well is a problem. Every qualifier you add makes your story sound less solid. Officers aren't interested in your flexible vacation planning. They want a number. A clear, confident number. 10 days? 2 weeks? 5 days? That's the answer. Not a range, not a maybe, not dependent on other factors. Just the number, and then silence. Why does this matter so much? Because overstaying visas is one of the primary concerns of every immigration system in the world. They're not trying to ruin your vacation. They're trying to identify people who might not leave when they're supposed to. If your answer sounds uncertain, it suggests you haven't really thought about your departure. And that uncertainty triggers something in their training, a mental note, a reason to ask 3 more questions instead of waving you through. The thing about immigration is they're pattern matching against thousands of previous interactions. Certain phrases raise flags. Certain tones create doubt. You might be completely honest and still sound suspicious simply because you're trying too hard to be accurate. So here's the rule that changes everything. Definitive beats detailed every single time. Then comes the question that separates tourists from potential problems. What's the purpose of your visit? This is where people talk themselves into trouble without realizing it. They start explaining their entire itinerary, naming friends, mentioning business contacts, describing family connections. Every extra detail is another thread the officer can pull. Tourism is a purpose. Business is a purpose. Visiting family is a purpose. Pick the one that matches your visa and stick to it. Don't blend categories. Don't add elaborate context. The moment you say you're a tourist, but also mention you might attend a conference or meet with some business associates, you've just created confusion about why you're really there. Immigration systems are literal. Your visa type corresponds to specific permitted activities. When your stated purpose doesn't align cleanly with your visa category, that's when the questions multiply. Suddenly they want to know about this conference. Who's hosting it? Where is it? Did you register? Do you have documentation? immigration? You started with a simple vacation, and now you're in an interview you never intended to have. The experienced traveler knows to keep purposes clear and separate. If you're traveling for multiple reasons, lead with the primary one that matches your documentation. Save the complicated explanations for people who actually want to hear your life story. Immigration officers aren't those people. Here's something most travelers never consider. These officers have likely already seen information about you before you open your mouth. Your flight details, your booking patterns, even social media in some cases. They're not asking to learn, they're asking to verify. When your verbal answer matches their existing data, you pass an invisible test. When it doesn't, you've just made yourself interesting in all the wrong ways. Question 4 reveals more than most people realize. What do you do for work? On the surface, they're making conversation. In reality, they're assessing whether your trip makes economic sense. Someone with a stable job has a reason to return home. Someone recently unemployed might be looking for opportunities to stay. Someone who's vague about their employment might be hiding something or might not have the funds to actually support their visit. The key is answering with the same confidence you'd use at a dinner party. I'm a teacher. I work in accounting. I'm retired from nursing. Clean, professional, done. Don't elaborate on job satisfaction, recent changes, or future plans unless specifically asked. Where this gets tricky is for people between positions or traveling during a career transition. The worst thing you can do is sound uncertain about your own employment status. If you recently left a job, frame it with structure. I finished a contract last month and I'm taking a vacation before starting my next position. That sounds intentional, planned, stable. Compare that to saying you're sort of between things right now and looking at options. Same situation, completely different impression. Immigration isn't judging your career success. They're judging whether you seem rooted somewhere else with reasons to leave their country when your visit ends. Retirees have an advantage here. Actually, retirement is clear, stable, and suggests financial independence. Just state it simply, I'm retired. If they want more details, they'll ask, but usually that answer satisfies the underlying question they're really exploring, which is whether you're the type of person who plans to disappear into their economy illegally. The fifth question feels almost conversational until you understand its purpose. Are you traveling alone? Maybe you are. Maybe you're not. Either answer is fine. What's not fine is contradicting the data they already have. If you booked a ticket with someone else, if your seat assignments show you're next to a companion, if your customs forms indicate you're part of a group, your answer needs to match. Immigration systems share information internally. The officer asking isn't starting from zero. They're verifying you're telling a consistent story. So if you're solo, say yes clearly. If you're with others, mention that simply without launching into how you know them or why you're traveling together. The reason this matters goes back to pattern recognition. People traveling in certain types of groups sometimes indicate human trafficking, smuggling operations, or organized immigration violations. Officers aren't accusing you of anything. They're just checking if your travel pattern raises questions. A straightforward answer that matches your documentation moves you past this checkpoint instantly. Question 6 probes deeper into your connections. Do you have any family here? This is profiling, plain and simple, but it's legal profiling based on immigration risk factors. People with family in a country are statistically more likely to overstay. That's not prejudice, it's data from decades of tracking. So officers pay attention to this answer and what follows. If you have no family there, a simple no ends the topic. Don't add nervous disclaimers like you don't know anybody at all or have zero connections. Just know, clean and calm. If you do have family, expect follow-up questions. Who are they? Where do they live? How often do you visit them? The officer is building a profile of how rooted you are elsewhere versus how much pull this country might have. Answer honestly, but minimally, yes, my daughter lives here. Yes, I have a cousin in the city. Then wait for the next question instead of volunteering your family tree. Here's the thing people miss. Having family abroad isn't a negative by itself. Lying about it is. Immigration databases increasingly link family relationships, especially for visa applications. If your previous paperwork mentioned a relative and you now deny their existence, you've just created a serious credibility problem. The emotional challenge is this question can feel invasive, especially if you have complicated family situations. But immigration isn't therapy. They don't need context or backstory. They need basic facts they can verify against other information. Keep your tone neutral, your answers brief, and move forward. Then comes the trap question that's not actually a trap unless you make it one. Have you ever been here before? Your travel history is already in the system. Every stamp in your passport, every electronic entry record, it's all logged. So this question isn't asking for new information, it's testing if you remember your own history accurately. If this is your first visit, say so. If you've been before, give a simple time frame. Yes, I was here 2 years ago. Yes, I visited last summer. Don't guess, don't estimate if you're unsure. If you can't remember exactly, it's better to say you've been before, but don't recall the exact year than to make up a date that contradicts their records. Why this matters becomes clear when you consider the bigger picture. Travelers who previously overstayed, violated visa terms, or had other issues are flagged in the system. Officers aren't necessarily denying entry to everyone with past problems, but they are scrutinizing those applications more carefully. If you casually forget to mention a previous visit where you overstayed by 3 weeks and they pull up that record, your credibility is destroyed instantly. On the other hand, if you had a previous issue but you're honest about your history and can show you're now following proper procedures, that honesty works in your favor, most people have perfectly clean travel records. For them, this question is genuinely simple. Answer it accurately in one sentence and move on. The only travelers who struggle here are the ones who get nervous and start second-guessing their own memory, creating hesitation that looks suspicious even when nothing is wrong. Question 8 is where honest people sometimes create huge problems for themselves. Do you have anything to declare? The panic-inducing reality is most travelers don't fully understand what needs declaring in the first place. Currency over certain amounts, definitely. Expensive electronics, sometimes. Food items, often restricted. Medications, depends on the country and the drug. Plants, soil, animal products, usually prohibited or restricted. The list varies by destination, and most people never read it carefully. Here's where good intentions go wrong. You packed some homemade cookies to share with friends, you're carrying prescription medication in an unmarked bottle, you bought an expensive watch at your last stop, and forgot about it. None of these are criminal acts, but failing to declare them when required can result in fines, confiscation, even criminal charges in extreme cases. The worst part is the embarrassment and time waste. Getting pulled aside for a full bag search because you incorrectly answered this question means missing your connection, arriving hours late, starting your trip stressed and frustrated. The right approach is simple, but requires preparation. Before you travel, actually look up that country's declaration requirements. Most immigration websites list them clearly. If you're genuinely carrying nothing that requires declaration, say no confidently. If you're unsure about something, ask. Better to declare something unnecessarily and have them wave you through than to hide something and get caught. Officers actually respect travelers who ask questions. It shows you're trying to follow the rules, not evade them. What they don't respect is obvious lying. If they find undeclared items in your bag and you just swore you had nothing, that's when your entire trip can unravel. Because now, it's not about cookies or medication. It's about dishonesty at a border crossing, which is taken very seriously everywhere. The 9th question seems administrative until you're standing there without a good answer. Where will you be staying? Officers expect you to know this. They expect you to know it without checking your phone, without shuffling through papers, without hesitating. Your accommodation should be memorized or immediately accessible. If it's a hotel, know the name. If it's with family or friends, know their city at minimum. The address level detail usually isn't required unless they specifically ask, but you should have it available. This connects back to earlier answers in a web of verification. You said you're staying 10 days for tourism. Now they want to know where. If you can't answer clearly, it suggests you don't actually have solid plans, which contradicts your earlier confidence about trip duration and purpose. Everything needs to align. The story you're telling should be consistent across every question because, in fact, it's not a story at all. It's just the truth presented clearly. Here's a common mistake. People book accommodation that doesn't match their stated purpose. You claimed you're a tourist, but you're staying at a business hotel near a corporate district for 3 weeks. That mismatch raises questions. You said you don't know anyone in the country, but you're staying at a residential address. That contradiction prompts follow-up. Make sure your accommodation actually supports the narrative you're presenting, because immigration officers do notice these logical inconsistencies. Finally, the 10th question closes the loop. Can I see your return ticket or onward travel? This is the proof that you're not planning to vanish into their country permanently. Every immigration system prioritizes this. They want evidence you intend to leave. A return ticket home is the simplest proof. An onward ticket to another destination works too. What doesn't work is having no ticket at all or having some vague plan to figure it out later. Many countries technically require proof of onward travel before they even let you board the plane in your departure city. But if you somehow made it this far without it, you're about to have a very difficult conversation. Have this document ready digitally or printed. Don't make them wait while you search through email. The faster you can produce it, the more organized and legitimate you appear. If your plans are flexible or you bought a refundable ticket, that's fine. They don't care about your travel style. They care that you have a ticket showing you leave. One detail people forget is the return date needs to fall within your permitted stay. If you're approved for a 2-week visa, but your return flight is in 4 weeks, that's a problem right there at the counter. Math errors are shockingly common and completely avoidable with simple double-checking before you travel. These are the 10 questions that seem routine but function as a sophisticated screening system designed to identify travelers who might not follow the rules. Understanding what's really being asked changes everything. You're not being interrogated, you're being read. And the good news is, you control the message you send. Preparation beats improvisation every time. Clarity beats elaboration. Confidence beats nervousness. None of this requires lying or pretending to be someone you're not. It just requires thinking through your trip from an immigration officer's perspective before you land. The travelers who breeze through these checkpoints aren't lucky, they're prepared. They know their own story, cold. They've got documents organized. They answer questions like they've done this 100 times because they understand it's not personal, it's procedural. Immigration isn't trying to catch you in some elaborate trap. They're trying to process thousands of people efficiently while identifying the small percentage who represent genuine concerns. Help them see you're not in that percentage and everything flows smoothly. Next time you're standing in that line, feeling the familiar anxiety creep up, remember this. Those officers aren't your adversaries. They're just doing a job, following a system, asking questions they've been trained to ask. Your job is simply to answer clearly, calmly, and consistently. Have your documents ready, know your basic trip details, project the quiet confidence of someone who belongs exactly where they are, doing exactly what they're doing. Because once you understand the psychology behind the process, you stop feeling like you're under suspicion and start feeling like you're exactly where you should be. Traveling, exploring, living the life you've worked hard to afford. If this breakdown helped you see immigration differently, share it with someone planning their next trip. These insights aren't secrets, but they're not obvious either. Most people learn them through stressful trial and error. You just learned them in advance, which means your next border crossing just got significantly smoother. Safe travels, and remember, preparation is the difference between anxiety and confidence at every airport in the world.